Have you ever spent way too long just trying to center something in CSS? I think we've all been there. Well, today, we're going to put an end to that struggle. We're going to completely demystify Flexbox by building something every single website needs, a professional, responsive navigation bar. Let's do this. Right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. You're just stacking random CSS properties, you're throwing margin auto on everything, you're trying these bizarre positioning hacks, and for what? Just to get that one little box in the middle of the screen? It's a classic web dev headache, but what if I told you there's a much better way? Well, the good news is those days are pretty much over. Modern CSS has given us a tool that is so powerful it honestly feels like a cheat code for building layouts. It's called Flexbox, and trust me, it's about to become your new best friend. So, what is this superpower exactly? At its heart, Flexbox gives a parent element, we'll call it a container, the amazing ability to intelligently arrange all of its children. It lets them stretch, shrink, and reorder themselves to perfectly fill whatever space is available. And the result? You get these clean, predictable layouts without all the usual headaches. Okay, the very first thing you need to get is this super simple parent-child relationship. You just pick a parent element, let's say our nav tag, and you give it one command, display flex. That's it. Instantly, that nav becomes a flex container, and all of its direct children, like a logo or a list of links, become flex items. Now, it's really important to remember this only affects the direct children, not the grandchildren. It's a simple distinction, but it's a powerful one. So, you've made a flex container. Now what? Well, the first big decision you have to make is all about direction. Do you want your items to line up side by side, in a row, or do you want them to stack on top of each other, in a column? The flex direction property is how you make that call. Your two main options are going to be row and column. Now, row is the default, which is perfect for a desktop navigation bar. And column is your absolute go-to for stacking items on a mobile screen. Honestly, if you can just remember row for desktop, column for mobile, you've already solved about 80% of your layout problems. It's that useful. Okay, so we've set the direction, but how do we control the spacing within that direction? This is where Flexbox really starts to shine. We're about to meet the two properties that are going to do most of the heavy lifting for you: justify content and align items. First up, let's talk about justify content. This property controls how your items are spaced along the main axis. And what's the main axis? It's just the direction you already set with flex direction. So if you chose row, the main axis is horizontal. If you chose column, it's vertical. It's that simple. For our navbar, justify content is what handles all the horizontal spacing. Let's look at a couple of key options here. Flex start is the default. It just bunches everything up at the beginning. But the real game changer is space between. This thing is magic. It pushes the first and last items all the way to the edges of the container, and then it distributes the rest of the space perfectly between the items in the middle. For a navbar with a logo on the left and links on the right, this is pure gold. One line of code, and our layout is basically done. Okay, so justify content handles the main axis. What about the other direction? That's where align items comes in. It controls the alignment along the cross axis, which is always perpendicular to whatever your main axis is. So if our flex direction is row, which is horizontal, then the cross axis is vertical. This is the property that finally solves that age-old problem of vertical centering. And for our navbar, align item center is exactly what we need. It doesn't matter if your logo is a little taller than your text links or if the text is taller than the logo. This one property just makes sure everything lines up perfectly right in the middle. It's clean, it's professional, and it's incredibly simple. Here's another really cool modern trick for clean spacing. You know, in the past, we'd add margins to each individual link to space them out. But the problem with that is you can get unwanted space at the beginning or the end. The much cleaner, more modern approach is to use the gap property right on the flex container. It adds consistent space only between the items, not on those outer edges. It's precise, and it's exactly what we want. All right, enough theory. That's the core of it. Now for the fun part. Let's put all this into practice and actually build our professional navigation bar from the ground up. So before we even think about writing a single line of CSS, we need a solid HTML structure. A great layout is always built on a great foundation. We're going to use a nav tag to tell browsers and screen readers, hey, this is the main navigation. And inside that, we'll use an unordered list, UL, with list items, LI, for our links. Using these semantic tags, tags that actually describe their content, is a real sign of a professional developer. And why do we even bother with this? Well, it's not just about being tidy. Search engines like Google understand these tags, which can seriously help your SEO. Screen readers use them to help visually impaired users navigate your site, making it way more accessible. And honestly, it just makes your code so much easier for other developers and your future self to read and understand. Okay, we have the structure, we have the basic layout. Now let's add those final polished details that really separate a good website from a great one. There are two properties that are going to take our navbar to the next level. First, position sticky with top 0 will basically glue it to the top of the screen as the user scrolls down, which is super useful on long pages. And second, z-index. Think of it like layers in Photoshop. By giving our navbar a high z-index like 999, we make sure it always stays on top of any other content on the page and never gets hidden. Now let's talk about user interaction. When someone hovers over a link, it's good to give them some kind of visual feedback, right? But a sudden, jarring color change like this, it can feel a bit abrupt, maybe even a little cheap. But look at the difference here. By adding just a single transition property in our CSS, we're telling the browser to smoothly animate the change from one state to the next. That color change now fades in beautifully over a fraction of a second, and it creates a much more polished, premium user experience. It's a tiny detail, but it has a huge impact. So we have this beautiful desktop navbar, but let's be real. Today, more than half of all web traffic is on mobile. So the final, and maybe the most crucial step, is making sure our layout can adapt to any screen size. Here's the challenge. On a wide desktop screen, a horizontal row looks fantastic, but on a narrow mobile screen, those same items would get all squished and become totally unreadable. The solution is to switch the layout to a vertical column, stacking the items on top of each other. The only question is, how hard is that to do? And here's the punchline. With the old CSS methods, this would involve all sorts of complex hacks. But with Flexbox, it's one line of code. Inside a media query that targets smaller screens, we simply change one property. Flex direction goes from row to column. That's it. No floats, no positioning nightmares, just one clean, logical change to completely transform our layout. That right there, that's the power of Flexbox. So there you have it. We've taken a really common layout problem. We've applied the core concepts of Flexbox to solve it elegantly. We added that professional polish, and we made it fully responsive. The power to create clean, modern layouts is officially